This is Jenny Kunkel, and in this video we are going to take a look at user-defined functions in SQL Server. We've been using functions within SQL Server such as the isNull, the coalesce, the getDate, etc. Now it's our turn to actually create a user-defined function that we can use within a SQL statement. When we write user-defined functions, they can have one or more parameters that they accept. They can even accept none if that's the case. But typically we're going to be passing in at least one parameter and they're going to return a value to us. We can write a scalar valued, a table valued, or a multi-statement table valued function. In our case, we'll be using a scalar valued function and creating that for this walkthrough. It's going to essentially accumulate the order line total and it's going to return that to us from our function. When we think about when we would write a user-defined function, it kind of follows the same premise as if we were writing some code. If we have code that we know that we're going to execute more than one time, we generally put it in a method or a function, and we can pretty much follow the same types of principles with SQL Server when we're writing our SQL Server functions. In this case, we're going to assume that this is something that we would want to keep around, possibly store within a source code repository. Therefore, we want to start with a database use statement indicating which database we're targeting. This is going to be in our Northwinds database. Once we do that, then we can go ahead and create our function. Now, I don't like using create function and then turning around and having to modify the script and change that to an alter function. So in my mind, it's much better to go ahead and do a drop function if exists. And we're going to call this dbo.fn order line total. Typically, when we write functions within SQL Server, we give it the fn prefix. If we're doing stored procedures, we give it sp, and if we do triggers, we do it trg. In this case, we have our function that we're going to drop. Because we want to turn around and create the function, we have to process that create in a batch, so we need to put a go statement. Now our function, this is going to be a create function. Going to essentially copy down the function name, and when we are going through and trying to accumulate the line item totals, we need to have our order ID in order to do that, so that will be the parameter that we pass in. We're going to define the variable order ID for our input argument, and this is going to be of type int. When we return something, it's going to be returning money because we have our unit price, which is money. We're going to multiply it by the quantity and then, of course, factor in the discount. So this is going to return money, and we use the returns keyword to do that. So return money. The next thing that we want to do is we want to ensure that somebody can't drop our order details table without knowing about this function existing. Similar to what we had with our view, we can provide the with schema binding, which will force them to actually drop the function before they could actually drop the order details table. So this is going to be with schema binding. Then we can put in our begin and our end block for our function. One of the things as we code through our function body, we know that we can select data for sure. What we don't know is that for our tables and views that are permanent objects in the database, we cannot perform any DML. So we can't perform insert, update, or delete statements within a user-defined function. If we create a temporary table or we create table variables, we can go ahead and perform insert, update, and delete operations against that before the value gets returned. But that's temporary. Those go away when our function's finished executing. So we can go ahead and insert, update, and delete all we want there. But if we're doing something that is going to exist after the function is over executing, then those permanent objects, we cannot perform insert, update, and delete activities or DML requests against them. So we're going to start with declaring a variable, and this variable is going to be our order total. This is what we are going to return from our function. It needs to be the same type as what our return type is, so we're defining it as money. We are going to go ahead and then put in our return statement. Now that we have that all framed out, we can go ahead and actually set the value to return, and this is going to be at order total, and this is going to be equal to a select statement. So I'm going to go ahead and put in my opening parenthesis, go to the next line, and put in the ending parenthesis. On this line, we want to put the select. We're going to hold off on coding what needs to be returned, and we're going to go and specify our from statement. This is going to be DBO dot, and then we have our order details. Then we can go ahead and specify our column in the table. This is going to be order ID, and we're going to qualify it by our input parameter, which is our @order ID. Now we're going to come up and finish off our expression here. We are going to be accumulating all of the line item totals, and this is going to mean that we need to use a sum, and we need to multiply the unit price by the quantity and factor in the discount. So if we do that, this is essentially meaning that we're going to take 1 minus the discount and multiply it by the unit price, and then multiply that against the quantity in order to get the actual value that the user is being charged. And because we're doing calculations, we may end up with more than 2 decimal places. So we want to go ahead and use our round function and round the results to 2 decimal places being returned. Now we can go ahead and select this and execute. Now our function has been created. And if we go ahead and scroll down to our programmability, expand that, go into our functions, we have our options of all the different types of functions we can create. If we look underneath the scalar valued functions, we have our function that we just created. We want to go ahead now and use it within a query. So we're going to essentially select some of the data from the orders table. So this is going to be select order ID, customer ID, order date, shipped date, and then maybe we want to go ahead and put in our function call now. So this is going to be essentially dbo.fn order line total, passing in our order ID from dbo.orders. And if we go ahead and execute this, we should see that we are getting the results from our user-defined function to go out and get the order line total for our orders.